So I woke up this morning to see a post by the American Association with People with Disabilities that showed a Washington Post article that talked about how the Trump administration is incarcerating houseless people in the name of maintaining public order and public safety. And this is, if you know anything about disability history, this is incredibly reminiscent of something called ugly laws or the beggar ordinances. So ugly laws were real laws for about 100 years, ending in 1976, that didn't allow or allowed for the incarceration, arrest, institutionalization, etc. of people who were ugly, unsightly, etc. So this includes people with disabilities, this includes houseless people, people asking for money, anybody that looked disabled or different or diseased or unsightly to, God forbid, the non-disabled elite. They could be institutionalized, disappeared, arrested, etc. So I'm going to say that again. If you were a person with a disability or a houseless person or otherwise eyesore to the public, you could be arrested, institutionalized, disappeared against your will just because you look a certain way. And before I talk a little bit more about that, I think it's important to say that if your concept of incarceration or arrest doesn't go beyond jails and prisons yet, it needs to. Incarceration, institutionalization, etc. can look like a nursing home. It can look like an institution. It can look like a mental hospital or a mental health or psychiatric hospital. It can look like a nursing home. It can look like a group home for people with disabilities, segregated disability housing, etc. So it's not that these people were solely being incarcerated in your local jails or prisons. These other places, such as disability institutions, mental health hospitals, nursing homes, etc., also are a part of the prison and incarceration system in the United States. So although these places may not appear to most people as the same as a jail or prison, there's a lot of similar themes as far as autonomy, safety, control, etc. of what people living in these places experience and compare it to people living outside of those places. So if you were a person with a disability living during the time of the ugly laws, you just wouldn't go outside. And that's if you had a home, right? That's a privilege. But compared to people who lived on the street or in public encampments or whatever, you just wouldn't go outside. And it's really frustrating to me when people are like, oh, like, autism numbers are so high, like there must be something wrong here, or like there's so many disabled people now, so many people are identifying as disabled. We weren't allowed outside. We were forced to live in institutions. We weren't a part of public life, so duh, like we weren't around, and therefore there's more of us now. But that's really not the case. We just weren't able to be a part of public life. And another important like wrinkle of this story is that these ugly laws or beggar ordinances and disability, like as a social projection of what is deviant or viewed as deviant at that time, was weaponized against people of color and people of low income. So if you were either of those groups, like you could easily be deemed deviant or non-compliant or whatever, even if you don't have a disability, and be made to have a disability by way of the social construction of what it means to have a disability, and therefore be institutionalized. Anyways, so that's just some background disability history for you to understand the current context. That it is concerning that the current administration is adopting these essentially new ugly laws so brazenly and publicly. And that's not to say that these things haven't continued, right? Like people with disabilities, houseless people that live in public space, like have been disappeared, and that's not just like starting now. This is like something that has been being worked up to be adopted in a way that is so intense. And although the article and like current status of this order is that it's to be for houseless people with mental illness or substance use disorder, it doesn't take a long jump to get to all people with disabilities, all people with substance use disorder, etc. It's planting the seeds of what is to come. All right, a couple thoughts about this. First of all, you can't talk about this issue without talking about housing in the United States and the current cost of living in the United States. Some people think that houseless people just live on the streets, don't contribute to society. That's so not true. Some of these people have jobs, work multiple jobs, and literally can't afford a home. So that's where they have to live. That's the current status of the United States. The houselessness problem in the United States is completely man-made. It could be solved. We already know how to solve it. It's a choice by the government to not fix it. It's also a complete like red herring or like false alarm that disappearing houseless people or people with disabilities or whoever it ends up being is in the name of public order and safety, when people with disabilities and people who don't have stable housing are way more likely to be victims of violence than to perpetrate violence. So do not like get persuaded by that whatsoever. Like that is just a conservative talking point to demonize people with disabilities and houseless folks. Also, make no mistake about the timing of this after the big ugly bill passed and how all of the money that's going from cutting Medicaid and SNAP and different public programs, how that is most definitely going to be going to building more institutions to house all the people they're about to arrest. If you learn anything about disability history and the movement towards institutionalizations in the 1900s, that's literally what happened. It was Medicaid fraud. It was an incentive to the people that ran institutions to get more people to live in the institutions, because if they had Medicaid or other public funding, that person living there would get that funding, but that funding would actually go to the institutions, and then they could use it to fill their pockets and not actually provide care to the people living there. One thing I really want to call out right now, as it's happening and before it happens even more, is the fact that you're going to see a lot of probably particularly white disabled people or otherwise privileged disabled people try to distance themselves from houseless people and people who have substance use disorder or have experienced addiction in their lifetime. And this has been like an ongoing issue that has been kind of interesting to witness, is that there's this perception of people who experienced addiction and substance use disorder and the shame around it as if it's in their control and they're doing it to themselves, when the good disabled people, the one that were born with disabilities, don't claim people with substance use disorder as a viable disability. When that, like, we know that that's not how substance use disorder or addiction is experienced, like, especially too, as one, it's passed down through families, it's genetic, so there's that if you really care about it being such a medical thing, but also like how we perceive disability as a socially constructed identity and like something that is put onto people, or people are regarded as disabled even if they don't quote unquote like have a disability. It includes people who have addiction. And there's actual legal precedents for this. People with substance use disorder and are being treated post addiction have ADA protection under the law. Anyways, I just wanted to call that out. Don't do that bullshit. We all need to stick together, please.